This is a podcast by the Straits Times.
Hello, I'm Deputy Foreign Editor Albert Wai, and you're listening to Asian Insider. This episode is on US-China trade war, the view from Beijing. We will be talking about what sort of leverage China has and where are the areas it could cause pain for America. Joining us today is ST's senior correspondent covering China, Ms. Yew Lun Tian. Here's one thing you need to know about Lun Tian. She has been reporting on China for around 10 years. She is very well traveled and has been to far-flung places, including the North Korean border and Xinjiang.
Hi, Albert. Thanks for having me. Happy to chat about what China is thinking about this trade war of the century with the US. And I think we have to note that we are recording this on July 17 because for all we know, we're going to wake up tomorrow and Trump will say something and things might change.
I'd like to start my podcast with a dummy question, and here's one for today. So that there have been so many twists and turns, in the tariff negotiations, and frankly, I'm a little disoriented. Can you give our listeners a quick recap, Lun Tian? How did we get here?
Okay, this is a little tedious, so bear with me and I'll take us through. So the US-China trade war began in 2018 during Trump 1.0, when Mr. Trump became the US president for the first time. So he accused China of unfair trade practices and he slapped tariffs of 20-something% on a range of Chinese goods. Mr. Joe Biden, who took over from Mr. Trump, kept the tariffs at largely the same level. Then, this year, after Mr. Trump returned to the White House, the trade war escalated to a whole new height. So on April 2nd, on what Mr. Trump called Liberation Day, he slapped tariffs on many countries, including China. After a few rounds of tit-for-tat retaliation, US tariffs on Chinese goods reached 145%, while Chinese tariffs on US goods reached 125%. So when tariffs are this high, it essentially means that there is a trade embargo, meaning no trade on either side. So subsequently, negotiators from both countries met in Geneva in May and agreed to a truce of 90 days, during which they would suspend most of the tariffs while they try to keep negotiating. And both sides last met again in London in June. So this is where we are now.
What is the mood among the negotiators? Based on your conversations with people who are based in Beijing.
From the Chinese side, I think there is a kind of quiet confidence. They are not as desperate for a deal right now as the US because they are kind of taking a wait-and-see approach because there are many movable parts and many unpredictable elements that can come out from Mr. Trump. So they're kind of waiting to see how the dust settles and to see how, what actions Mr. Trump will take when he gets too anxious.
Let's talk a little bit about rare earths because it has been weaponized by China. Can you tell us where is China's leverage on this exactly?
Okay, so the first thing that we need to know about rare earths is that they are not rare. In terms of absolute quantities in our planet, so some types of rare earths are even more abundant than lead or copper. So what is rare about them is the fact that these elements are very dispersed. So therefore, it's very difficult to mine them in an economically viable way. So this is where China comes in. So as of today, China has the most cost-efficient technology to extract and mine the rare earths and to process them to make magnets. So this is why, while only slightly less than half of the world's rare earth deposits are found in China, over 2/3 of the global mining of the rare earths is done by China, and China also controls 80-90% of the processing of the rare earths elements into magnets. So in April, China added 7 rare earths to its control export list, which means you now need a special license to buy the rare earths from China. And because you don't know for sure whether you can get the license or when you can get the license, this severely disrupted the supply chain of rare earths for a lot of US companies. And this even resulted in the pausing of some car production in America. China also banned 16 US firms, mainly in the defense and aerospace industry, from buying its rare earths.
And if they refuse to provide any of this to the Americans, how exactly would it hurt Americans? What kind of products are we talking about? Mobile phones or chips?
Yeah, you're right. So these magnets are absolutely crucial to make the many things that the US cannot live without, from smartphones to electric vehicles to computer hard drives. And most critically, the rare earths are needed to make advanced weapons, such as missiles and submarines. So, for example, to make a F-35 fighter jet, you need 900 pounds of rare earths element. 900 pounds, that's 400 kg, or how much a polar bear or a grand piano would weigh.
And on America's end, it seems that one of its trump cards might be advanced chips. And earlier this week, it was reported that Nvidia will be allowed to resume the sale of H20 AI chips to China soon. What is the significance of this?
Okay, so first let's look at what are H20 chips. They are the best chips that are now legally available to China. But these are actually not the best performing in the global market. Nvidia has deliberately lowered the computing power of the H20 chips to make it less advanced than its flagship H100 chips. But now that China has this H20 chips, right? What it means is that Chinese tech firms can use the H20 chips to develop and improve its AI products, such as DeepSeek and self-driving cars.
And if the Americans allow China to have such H20 AI chips, what might it want in return? Are we talking about a deal between chips and rare earth, for instance?
You're right. US Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick told the press that allowing Nvidia to sell H20 chips to China is in return for China allowing more rare earth access to the US.
You were at the China International Supply Chain Expo earlier this week. So, what was the mood like among the businesses that you met there?
So the mood is actually quite festive. So on one hand, Jensen Huang, who's the CEO of Nvidia, he was there, and so he was like the superstar, and everyone was crowding around him. They want to take photo with him. And then the other suppliers or the other companies that were there, they were also happy to be seen to be part of China's supply chain because they want to show the Chinese government that they still have some confidence or they are still committed and still interested in the Chinese market and in using the production of China for their products. So we see lots of demonstration of industrial robots, electric vehicles, pharmaceuticals. Yeah, so everybody's just trying to show that, hey, let's try to do as much trade as we can, even though there is this trade war between China and US looming over everyone.
I want to ask a little bit about Jensen Huang. He's like the rock star of the tech world, is he not? In his leather jackets and all. Did you see him and what was it like?
Yeah. So I saw him at the banquet dinner when everybody was wearing suit and tie, and he was wearing his very iconic black leather jacket with a plain black t-shirt inside and tight black jeans. Then on the next morning at the opening ceremony, he switched to Mandarin collar Chinese suit. And I think it was a subtle but yet a very clear sign that he's trying to show the Chinese that, hey, I'm trying to play nice. I'm trying to show that I appreciate being here in your country, and therefore I put on this Chinese suit. But at the same time, even though you might call this a charm offensive, he made it very clear that he's from the US. He represents an American company, that he grew up in the US. And he even spoke in very halting Chinese. He said he's going to speak in Chinese for the first time at the request of the organizer of this supply chain expo. But he spoke it in a very halting way, which kind of is also another way to show that, hey, I may be speaking Chinese or Mandarin, but I'm not totally Chinese. So don't treat me like I'm totally in your books.
And what has the reception been towards Jensen Huang in terms of how the public is talking about this in terms of social media chatter? How are they viewing his appearance in China this week?
So the social media was flooded with videos of his appearance, the free-flowing way in which he took questions from media inside a Hutong hotel. And in a way, they were proud to see that as an ethnic Chinese, like, his company is one of the highest valued in the world. He has managed to be so innovative in making his chips, which work for AI. And now that he shows that he wants to come into the Chinese market, they see it as like a boost, like a vote of confidence in Chinese technology advancement.
Another hold that China has on America, Lun Tian, is in its control over parts of the US supply chain for a wide range of goods. We are talking about simple stuff like toys to festive decorations and pharmaceuticals. So if the US continues on its current course, is it actually hurting itself in the long run?
Yeah. So, well, let's talk about the short run first. In the short run, it's hard for Americans to be happy without Chinese goods. So, for example, July 4th, Independence Day, when they want to let off fireworks, they need the fireworks explosives that are made from Hunan, this province in China. When it comes to December, when they want to celebrate Christmas, the decorations are most cheaply and efficiently produced in China. And if they want like fast fashion, it would be clothes made in Shenzhen or like the Guangdong area. And if they want toys for their children, yeah, it's also made in China. So in the long run, they are trying to move some of the industries back, but it's going to be hard. And also they may try to also set up new manufacturing lines in other countries, and that's going to take time too. When companies see that the trade war is going to stay, they will have to make some decision as to what point they will have to invest and commit to a new production outside of China.
I want to switch the topic to fentanyl because if you listen to President Trump, it is a root cause of his actions. But Beijing already has a zero tolerance drug policy on this end. So what else can it actually do about this, and in the hope that it would potentially address Washington's concerns?
Yeah, so Washington has accused Beijing of failing to stem the curb of the flow of precursor chemicals for fentanyl. They say that this is a leading cause for overdose deaths in the United States. But Beijing said, no, 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 we have always been zero tolerant with drugs. We've done everything that we can to clamp down. So what more you're asking, right? So just yesterday, July 16, the US President Trump said that he thinks China will soon sentence people to death for fentanyl manufacturing and distribution. So this sounds very draconian. And we haven't heard any official confirmation from the Chinese side yet. Let's see where that takes us. So another thing that maybe China can do is to put the precursor ingredients for fentanyl on the export control list, which means every time a company wants to import this kind of chemicals from China, they will have to go through a lot of application and administrative checks. This would also make it hard for the chemicals to be exported for proper legal use. So it's not sure whether China will actually go to that extent.
How does TikTok feature in this whole US-China tension? Because Trump said he pretty much has a deal, and I'm quoting him based on media reports. But Beijing hasn't really shown its cards. Does TikTok have any strategic value to China here?
So I think at first China felt that TikTok or that is owned by the parent company Douyin had some issues about information security, data protection. But now that TikTok has, it's totally sort of separated out into like company that's outside of this mother company in Douyin, when all the information, there is no overlap in the information between the Chinese users and the overseas users, Beijing is less worried about it as a security risk. It is now just using it, holding on to it as like a bargaining chip for probably part of the grand bargain that it hopes to strike with Trump with regards to the rest of the tariff levels for the rest of the goods, and also probably for to see how well behaved so-called Trump is, how sincere he is in trying to strike a deal that is reasonable with China.
There's one issue that I do not fully understand: transshipment tax. Because when the Trump administration announced tariffs, they always bring this in as a related issue. How exactly does transshipment tax affect China? Or is it something that its trade partners in Asia should worry about, for instance?
Right. So to be clear, I think everybody is also a bit scratching their head and trying to figure out how exactly will US use transshipment tax or other kind of secondary tariffs to target China via other countries. So we know that this China-US trade war is happening in the background of US imposing many tariffs on many other countries. And so as all these countries are trying to do their bilateral negotiation with Trump, what Trump may ask of them is not just a tariff level that reflects the sort of trade surplus or trade deficit that this country bilaterally has with Trump, but also whether Trump is also looking at possibly ways to impose tariff on these other countries to sort of discourage them to do trade with China. So one way is probably through transshipment tax, which is if let's say a good was shipped from China and maybe there's some value add that's being done in this third country such as Vietnam or Indonesia, and then it gets shipped to US. So Trump may choose to impose a certain additional levy on top of whatever tariff that it is imposing on this country.
Do you think this will affect Singapore at some point?
Who knows, right? Yeah, I think our Deputy Prime Minister Kam Keng Yong is heading there to try to have some kind of talk and maybe to get some clarity about how Trump, what he's thinking about how to impose the tax. But one thing to note is that while many countries are worried about the tariff that US levies on them, they are also very mindful that China is a major trading and investment partner with them as well. So while they hope to please Trump as much as possible, they are also very hesitant to throw China under the bus to sacrifice their relationship with China just to please US, because in the end it might end up to be not a good deal for them.
I want to talk a bit about China's GDP figures that came out earlier this week. The economy grew by 5.3% in the first half of 2025, and the growth for the second quarter was 5.2%. What are economists saying over there in China? Is the growth slowing, and will this prompt China to make some sort of concessions in the end?
Right. I don't know, to me, GDP figures sometimes feels a bit like reading the tea leaves, because they set the GDP figures at the beginning of the year, and at the end of the year, somehow miraculously, it would always be quite close to the initial target. So I don't know. So this 5.3, 5.4 is even slightly above the about 5% target that they sort of set for themselves at the beginning of the year. I guess at the top level, the national level, it projects a certain kind of confidence that they are on track to accomplishing whatever development targets that they set for themselves. At the people level, at the business level, things are a bit murky. We see people, anecdotally, we hear them saying they are doing more home cooked food, and businesses are also cutting back on frivolous spending, like less advertisement on the media, or instead of, let's say, when they travel outside, they spend less on their meals and their hotel stay. So is that a good signal of that the economy is very rosy and very robust? I'm not sure. I think, yeah, we will have to see how this trade war plays out and how it affects the people on the ground.
Earlier, when you were talking, you mentioned grand bargain, so I want to return to that discussion. In your view, is there scope for some kind of grand bargain here, and is this something that China is working towards?
So this is another concept that gets thrown out in this discussion about trade war, that everybody sort of have a different idea of what a grand bargain can look like. Essentially, conceptually, it just means it's a bargain that takes into account many different elements, that is not just trade tariffs, but also maybe other security or strategic considerations. So from China's point of view, what they care about most is actually Taiwan. And like if the US can make some kind, or Trump can make some kind of commitment to say that he wouldn't support or he would oppose Taiwan's independence efforts, China might then decide that, okay, then US deserves to be given more leeway in terms of tariffs. But it is unclear how this will play out. And China officially has always said that tariff is tariff, economic is economic, and Taiwan is a non-negotiable issue. But yeah, we are seeing this trade war, this economic competition. It's not that the US started. It's not just because the US worry about China as an economic power, but it's also because US see China on the whole as a strategic rival, and therefore nothing is completely just dollar and cents. It's really a complete overall assessment.
When you take into account all these issues and the global picture, if I'm to ask you to put a number on the probability of such a grand bargain from 0 to 100%, right now, what is the first number that comes to your mind?
Wow, you put me on the spot. I really don't know because there is just so much change, like one day Trump say this and another day he says another thing. And then it's not just what he says about China, but also what he says about the other countries. So I really don't know how to answer this question. I surrender.
Let me kind of reframe this, right? So we've been talking about leverage for quite a while now. So in your view, who has more bullets on its end, the Americans or the Chinese? Or rather, which side has the more powerful bullets, the armor-piercing type that will bring the other party to its knees?
Wow. Okay, that sounds quite scary. Okay, let me think of it this way. Who will win the trade war? Or at least who will come out of the fight with less bruises or lighter black eye? I think it's a combination of two factors. One factor is how much pain one can inflict on the other, which goes to your question of who has more bullets. And the other factor, which I would argue is the more important factor, is how high is your threshold for pain. So in terms of how much pain one can inflict or which side has more powerful bullets, I feel it's also very hard to say because rare earths and chips are like comparing apples and oranges. And also, whatever advantage that either China has or US has on the other side in terms of rare earths or chips, it may not last forever, as what our Prime Minister Lawrence Wong said when he visited China last month, which is that when one country tries to choke the excess of the other country with whatever thing that it is its comparative advantage, it will just force the other country to find alternatives elsewhere. So this powerful bullet, it can be very armor piercing right now, but later on it can be just, like a feather that doesn't hurt the other side anymore once alternatives are being developed.
I promise this will be the last difficult question I pose today, but I want to do a little bit of what I call crystal ball gazing as we approach the end of the recording. What do you expect to see from both sides in the next 2 to 3 weeks?
Okay, I don't know about 2 to 3 weeks, but I can imagine for the next 2 to 3 months, one thing that's probably going to happen is a summit between President Xi Jinping and President Donald Trump. It has been reported that China has invited Trump to come and attend its victory parade, so-called military parade on September 3rd. It's quite unlikely that he would come, but it's more likely that he may come in October to Asia, to South Korea to attend APEC. And if the mood is good, if the discussions have been going on well, he may then come over to Beijing and meet Xi Jinping. So when that happens, if the leaders at such a high level meet, it must mean that there would already be some fruitful discussion at the lower levels for them to then announce the deliverables after this meeting. So I would imagine the officials on both sides are now busy trying to find some common ground and to see how much give and take each side can do.
And that's a wrap for this episode. I really enjoyed talking about what China's thinking might be for the tariff negotiations, even though there is a sort of an uneasy truce between both sides at the moment. You've been listening to Asian Insider. I'm Albert Wai. If you like what you've heard, please share this podcast with your friends and family. This episode was produced and edited by Faiza Sani. Thank you for listening.
Send your feedback to podcast@sph.com.sg. Find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or within our Straits Times app. Thanks for listening.